thank you all for being here this evening. And we're here in the Gillespie building in Jonesboro, named for Elmer Gillespie, who is very important in the food pantry, which is in this building, and also a student at Booker T. Washington School, which is what the McKinney Center is today. So that's our connection. But I will go ahead and throw it on over to our moderators, Michelle, Treece, and Brittany Butler. So
hello, hello. Happy New Year 2022.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us. I just wanted to start with a quick overview, maybe for some folks who might not be as familiar with Conversations That Matter, but this program is a monthly online series in which we have two local guests explore their own culture and perspective and talk about what makes them unique, and maybe discover some of their own similarities and explore their differences. They look at where their lives might intersect personally and in the community. And so the goal for each conversation is for guests and participants to hear real stories from real neighbors, which humanizes those different from us. Wow. And so we'll switch it over to our guests.
And while we're switching, if you guys are interested in being on our show, then just drop your name here and we'll reach out, and we're setting up our program for the rest of the year and hopefully many years to go. So yeah, let us know if you're interested. Okay, welcome. You guys are return guests.
Thank you.
It's a special opportunity to come in and share more with us. So for those folks that were not with us last time, just give us a really brief intro on who you are, what you do, and all that kind of good stuff. And we'll start here.
Okay, I'm Theresa McGary. I am a linguist at East Tennessee State University in the Literature and Language Department. I teach some linguistics and I train teachers of English as a second language. I also teach some composition, academic reading and writing. I come from small town Michigan, and I have lived and worked in a few countries overseas, and then I've lived also in Columbia, South Carolina, but I came here in 2004.
Great. And how about you, Phyllis?
I'm Phyllis Thompson. I am an associate professor in literature at East Tennessee State University, and I've been since 2012, I've been director of women, gender, and sexuality studies. But this year, I have the honor of serving as interim chair of counseling and human services in the Clemmer College, which has been a learning curve and has just been a real honor and just a wonderful opportunity. In the community, I serve on the board for RISE, Healthy for Life. I serve on the advisory board for the ETSU Office of Equity and Inclusion, and I'm also on the executive committee for the Ballad Health ETSU Strong Brain Institute. And I mentioned these three things because they kind of combine three of my passions in life, and that is women and people's health and well-being, also trauma-informed care work, and equity and inclusion and social justice work. And so these experiences give me opportunities to do some of that work in the community.
You mentioned trauma-informed care, which I think is one of the way cool things that we have here. Can you give a brief description about that for folks who, and I don't think if you're not actively engaged in individuals that are part of that, you may not have a clue what that is. So can you share for some of our folks out here what trauma-informed care is?
Yeah, I think the matchbook, maybe the matchbook version, that is that trauma-informed care is an approach that that helps us build resilience in the community. So if the community is ETSU, or if the community is Johnson City or Washington County, trauma-informed care is an approach that helps us build that. And it's an equity approach to leveling the playing field. And in other words, so we think about, use an example, we think about safety, for example, and in classroom settings. So if we want to take trauma-informed approach to teaching and learning, then we want to think about how is the classroom safe enough for students to learn, and what are some of the roadblocks to that learning. Trauma-informed care gives us a lens to explore and investigate that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Again, unless you're in it, you probably have not heard of that. And
Yeah.
that's a pretty new thing, maybe
Yeah.
within the last 10 years or so. So
Yeah, Becky Haas and Andy Clements have been really important in our community in training people all across the community. And Becky Haas is even doing international consultant work. ETSU with the Strong Brain Institute, partnering with Ballad Health, is doing a lot of work at ETSU in trauma informing our institution, so that the institution, our students are more resilient, our campus is a more resilient campus, as well as initiating a charge across universities in the United States.
So if someone is in a private industry, maybe they're working with a church,
Yeah.
and they're interested in having this training, or maybe being able to understand that,
Yeah.
where would they go? They call you.
Yeah, they can call me. They can also go to the Strong Brain Institute website, at the East Tennessee State University website. And we have a certification program that people can get badges. So you can start with the very basics of trauma-informed care and learn about the basics and build, and so that you slowly build your practice. But there's lots of information at the ETSU website on that. And this is not just for education, it's for hospitals, it's for nonprofit organizations, it's for churches, in terms of how do we make our spaces safe, how do we make them equitable, how do we work with people so that we're really listening to one another, how are we compassionate, so this is at the policy, at the individual level, at the policy level, and at the program level.
Has the approach affected secondary and primary schools yet?
Yes, it
Oh, no
has.
kidding.
It has. There's been more work in primary and secondary education than there has been in higher education,
Oh, no
actually.
kidding.
So all the work has been pretty much surrounding public school education. And so now what we're doing, and this is why the Strong Brain Institute is so important, is because it's leading the charge for higher education. And there's other institutions, the University of Buffalo social work program and Florida State University are leaders in these initiatives as well. But yeah.
What I like about it is that, I'm a retired teacher, and I can remember in the very beginning, even when I was a student, teachers come across, this is how it is. And all students are treated exactly the same. And we have some equality in that kind of space, but when you have a kid who doesn't talk, doesn't answer back to you, or doesn't look you in the eye, or whatever the case might be, I think this approach allows you to see that kids come into a classroom, or people come into your church, or whatever the setting is, with a completely different background experience, which determines their response within that setting. And we can't expect all people to do exactly the same. So I love that it gives you that other opportunity to see there's stuff going on.
Trauma-informed care approaches help us think about the difference between things in the classroom being equal and being equitable, because just because they're equal doesn't mean they're equitable for all kids. And I think that's an important dimension of this approach. And it also asks us to think about what Dr. Diana Moreland at ETSU talks about, the scary background music we bring with us, because we bring our life experience with us to this place, to the classroom, and so do our students. And so we can be walking. Diana has a video that she plays of a walk through the woods, and one of the walks has this beautiful background music you know, like a sonata. It's just lovely. And the other sounds more like dun, 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 dun. And what she talks about is when we're sitting with another across the table from another person, we don't know at any time what their background music is that's going on in their head and what their experience of this place is, the classroom, or and that has impact on teaching and on learning, particularly on students learning. So if they're sitting in my classroom hearing dun, 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 and I'm talking about transformational pedagogy, all they're hearing is the shark attack. They're not safe enough to be able to experience the things that I'm talking about in the classroom. Yeah.
And yet we expect everything to be the same. We expect the performance from those students to be the same. Let's all make A's or B's or whatever,
Right.
complete this assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
Teresa and I just were in a book
That's what I was
club.
thinking of too.
Yeah, we read a book called The End of Average. And so if you orchestrate things for the average student, you're actually making it so that it is for no one.
Yes.
Because there's no such thing as average.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
that
not
brings
that
up
there's
good
a
point.
core kind of student and then there's a traumatized student. It's every single person has their own path they need to follow to learn.
And it also brings up that addressing the needs of one student is not going to put others at a disadvantage. And so that kind of lends into like universal design. I think I've seen that with higher education a lot.
yeah.
The book is
Yeah.
by Todd Rose, The End of Average. We highly recommend it, don't we? I do.
Todd Rose.
Yes.
So with that in mind, this book that you read, how will you change, or how would you think about changing up how you teach, how you interact with others?
One thing that came up was a person who gives the same exam an unlimited number of times. Obviously, you have to design your exam carefully so that it's the student can't demonstrate competence just by memorizing some answers that they don't understand, but allow multiple attempts for various speeds of learning. And don't work with the assumption that this student is a fast learner, this student is a slow learner. People are more complex than that. Everybody will be fast at some things and slow at some things. And try to provide as much flexibility regarding timing was one of the ideas I found interesting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then if you remember the analogy to like riding a bike or your driver's license, that exam where you can take multiple tries to ride a bike, it just matters, can you ride a bike?
Oh, I love that.
So structuring a class based on competency, what
Yeah.
you learn.
Yeah, because I would not have learned to ride my bike if I didn't fall off of it.
Right.
So that just normalizes failure, and that failure is a part of the process of learning rather than something to be shamed for, right? So if I fail, well, that meant I must have done something. So now I can go to the next level.
Let's back in line to this whole idea of equity
Yeah.
versus equality.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, tell me your thoughts on the differences between those two words, equity and equality. I think a lot of people tend to want to think they're the same.
Yeah.
Do you think they're the same?
No. No, but Phyllis can probably give it better definition than me. I think my understanding of it is that equality means offering everybody the same thing. And equity means providing everybody an equal opportunity, which, given the nature of people, will not involve offering everybody the same thing.
Beautifully said. No, I couldn't have said it better. That's beautiful. I think of that image, the image where the kids are watching a baseball game and they all have the exact same step. right? So they all get one box so they can look over the fence to see the baseball game.
Mm.
But the problem is they're different heights. So one like is, like a 5-year-old and is this tall, and the other one's an 18-year-old. And so he's this
Mhm.
tall. And so with the same step, which is
Mhm.
equal,
Mhm.
they don't have the same opportunity to see the game. And so to make an
Right.
equitable opportunity, we have to change what the step looks like. And
Right,
so I think that might be an example of your definition.
right.
Yeah.
And there's another image of that where a child is in a wheelchair. One of the kids is in a
Yes.
wheelchair.
Yes.
And you're right, everybody gets one step, one box.
Yeah.
And so the 6 foot tall kid gives his
Yeah.
box to the other kid, so he's got
Yeah.
2 boxes he can see over.
Yeah.
And then they build a ramp
Yeah.
for the
Oh.
child in the wheelchair, so.
Yeah.
And it's very important, I don't know, I'm moving toward, like in our community, is it equitable, is it equal? We hear a lot of people saying, everybody's the same, we're all, and there has to be an understanding that we're not all the same.
No.
And it's not to point out that, oh, you're trying to make an issue here because we all should be treated the same.
Yeah.
It's to point out that we are different and we do need different things in order to have that same opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of folks have a hard time seeing that and understanding that.
Yeah. And that difference gives us a richer experience. The difference between our feet and our hands and our eyes and our voices and our heads. And I mean, they're all different parts of one body. And so I think about, I think about how that, maybe that's not a very good example, but I think about how that difference provides me with more opportunity to do more things. And I think it's the same way in community when we have more different ideas, perspectives, people around the table. We have more opportunity. We have better conversations. We have richer experiences together. We can do more to make change or to envision new things. But I also think that's what Audre Lorde talks about when she talks about the hard work of coalition. And I think that kind of coalition work is harder than consensus work.
I need to read more of her. Do you read a lot of Audre Lorde?
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
Probably the transformation of pain into silence and pain into transformation of action. Yeah, it's from Sister Outsider.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a speech that she gave, and it's a speech she gave to the Modern Language Association. And this was around the time she was learning that she had breast cancer, and she was talking to her daughter, trying to figure out what to do for this speech. And what she says what she comes around to discovering is that it's not our difference, it's not our ideas that should scare us. It's not our voices. It's not speaking up that should be so frightening to us. It's our silence. That's what should frighten us is our silence, and what all that means in terms of our complicity, or in terms of just not being authentic to ourselves and to others around us, to our community. So my voice has been scary for me. Speaking out has always been, that's been hard. I might do it, but it's not because it's easy for me. And so that is, I go back and read that essay of hers every year and just so moved and share with my students as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Theresa, what's something that you've read or that you read that has like a powerful impact on you as a person?
Well, that's a good question. Think about that.
Ready for that?
You know what? My favorite book is usually the one I most recently read. And I'm not a religious person, but I am a fan of Anne Lamott. And my best friend just bought me her new book for Christmas, and it is magnificent. Dusk, Night, Dawn. For one thing, she cracks you up. If you just need a really good laugh, I read an essay in the morning when I'm in an essay book. It's just read one per morning, and that's what I did for a couple of weeks. There are 13 essays in there. And first thing it does is give you a good laugh in the morning. And then it gives you ideas to think about all day.
Oh, that's good.
She manages to be very inspirational and hopeful without being the slightest bit, without losing the sarcastic edge.
That's good. Now, what's that name of the book again?
It's called Dusk, Night, Dawn.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Are you guys both avid readers?
Oh, yes.
I don't know. Are you in a book club right now?
I am.
What are you in? What are you guys reading? I should say.
We are about to discuss The Weight of Ink, a new book by Rachel Kadish, I think, or Kadish. I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
The Weight of Ink.
Yes. It's
Like INK or,
Mhm.
okay, you know, let's incorporate it, but
no.
INK.
And what's it going to be about? Do you have a clue yet?
The book, it is
I think it's tattoos.
a dual story. That didn't even occur to me. That's a good one. It's a dual story about these historians in England researching this woman who lived in the Jewish community in the 17th century in London. But she was in part of the international Jewish community. They all kept in touch and wrote a lot of letters and stuff. So it's both her story and their story told in tandem. Very interesting. If you remember the movie Yentl, a big part of the conflict is that same conflict. All she wants is to be a scholar, and it's not allowed because of her gender.
Right.
So, but it goes in a somewhat different direction. How about you? Are you in a book club?
You know, I'm in a book club right now with part of the Langston group, and it's The Sum of Us, I think it is. And I've only been, we meet Thursday evenings, and so it sometimes mixes up with this Thursday and not. And it's very interesting. It's talking about how white supremacy and racism really has an impact on everybody. You know, we think that it's just Black folks or just, you know, case of lower income folks or Hispanics or whatever, but it doesn't. When everyone hurts, when some people are affected, everyone is affected. And it talks about that. That's the goal of this.
Sounds
So,
good.
very interesting. Very interesting. How about you?
Yeah.
Phyllis, are you in a book club?
So I'm in a Sunday school class that functions as my book club because we read books together, and we just finished an Advent study since it was that Advent season. So we just finished that, and now we're turning to, which some other people in the class have already started, so I'm a little behind, but a book called The Celtic Christ, and I haven't started reading it, so I'm not sure what is in store for me, but that's the book that the class is on now and moving to.
That's cool.
Yeah, so, and they've already started it, and so I've got to catch up, but I look forward to that.
That's great. Okay, how about you?
Yeah, I had to look it up. I'm good. I haven't started it yet. But we're doing, I haven't started, but Educated by Tara Westover.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that one's been out
yeah.
for a little bit, but it's a memoir. Amazon tells me, because I haven't started it yet, but that one should be good. But it just makes me think, like, you mentioned the, you know, white supremacy affecting everyone and the benefits of diversity. Have you still at any point had to convince people of the merit of diversity or equity, or seen it work well in the workplace or, you know, in your personal life? Because you know, they still have, I feel like you're still in 2022, still having maybe to convince folks the merits of diversity or lack of diversity being a problem, and it almost links to like the silence bit, right? Not saying something being an issue just as much as active oppression maybe. So just what are any thoughts come up around that?
Yeah, I think that's part of the difficult conversation and being willing to have the difficult conversation. And for me, it's, and I wear different hats. So let's say I've got my teacher Phyllis hat on. And so part of having the difficult conversation is amplifying student voice, which means amplifying all student voices. And so if we have a comfort agreement in the classroom that we get to learn together, but we need to be respectful and respect one another and let people learn how to articulate ideas, then we need to let people learn how to articulate all ideas. And in my young adult literature class last year, I had the experience of a young woman having a lot of problems with privilege and diversity and on and from a very right-wing sort of oppressive point of view, I felt like. But we had our comfort agreements in the class that we were amplifying student voices, and everyone got a chance to articulate and create knowledge. And so I was really proud of her for sharing her truth or beliefs, and the class being willing to ask questions about that. And by the end of that class period and the end of the semester, I saw real change. Not because she had to have any particular belief, but that she had the opportunity to think through ideas and question and explore with other people. So that's one experience. But yeah, I do see that, and I do see that in students. But I think it's back to trauma-informed care. I think we have to provide spaces that are safe enough for all students to learn, and sometimes that means keeping respect and rigor at the top, holding that, but also making sure that we're asking people to be accountable, but making sure we don't shame people for their ideas. But I think that's part of the difficult conversation. And that, I don't know, what's your experience with that?
When the kind of diversity that I am most directly concerned with is linguistic diversity.
Yeah.
And I sort of have a two-sided story about that, because I teach a grammar class, and I've been teaching this class for over 10 years now, a lot, like 2 or 3 times a year. And at the point where I first started, maybe about 2008 or 9, I think it was, there are 2 approaches to grammar called prescriptive and descriptive. The descriptive approach to grammar says that the rules that you state are the rules that you see people actually following. It's a science. So you describe the language in the same way that biologists describe plants and animals. You just look at what people are doing, and you state those rules. Where prescriptive, the rules that you state are what you think people should do. So for example, a prescriptive rule is when you want to ask permission, use the word may. Descriptively, you would say that when people want to ask permission, they might say, may I go to the bathroom? But usually they just say, can I go to the bathroom? So when I first started teaching the course, that's always the first topic that we deal with, because it affects my whole approach. And I would ask the students to explain the difference to me to make sure that they understood it, and then to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the different approaches, say which one they preferred and why. and I would get the traditional answer mostly, which is, of course, prescriptivism is right. People can't just run around saying anything they want to say. They should talk correctly. And the point of view that goes along with that is that there's only one way to talk correctly, and that's the standard English way. It does, so for example, the Michigan dialect is just wrong. It's not a different dialect, it's bad English. The Australian and British English usually take a pass, but for but say Florida English, no, that's just bad English. Texas English, no, just bad English, no. The Northwestern, even the New York dialects, certainly the African American dialects, all of those are just bad English. That I saw that attitude change year by year until it was about balanced. And now I very rarely get a student who doesn't say, of course, descriptivism makes more sense. I very rarely get that. So, and going along with that, they get that people speaking different dialects different than standard English are not breaking the rules of standard English. They are following the rules of a different dialect. You don't do random things in any dialect. Every single dialect has rules and people follow them. This seems to be common knowledge anymore. And that is a big change over the last 15 years, I would say, in at least the students that I'm familiar with. So on the one hand, there's a much better acceptance of diversity. The dark side is that in society still, there are many manifestations of lack of acceptance of diversity. So when I was getting ready to come here tonight, I was thinking back to the presidential address of the Linguistic Society of America in 2016. Our president then was John Rickford. He's personally from Guyana, so he speaks several dialects of English. Certainly he speaks standard English and also Guyanese English and several more. And in his presidential address that year, he analyzed the treatment of Rachel Jeantel at the trial of George Zimmerman.
And Rachel is the girlfriend.
The girlfriend,
Yes.
Trayvon's girlfriend, and she was the main witness for the prosecution. And she was villainized for the way she looked, for being overweight, for being, I don't think anybody specifically said the wrong color, but for being working class, but especially for her dialect. The jurors, when interviewed afterwards, said, no, I don't trust her. She used phrases I didn't understand. And she actually was not understood in the class, in the courtroom. That dialect was one that's unfamiliar to most people. A translator should have been provided. A transcript should have been provided. Many things that would have accomplished equity should have happened. She was not treated equitably. She was treated the same as somebody who speaks standard English, but that did not achieve equity. So that was just one example. I was thinking about that one because in John Rickford's conclusion in that presidential address that year, I remember him saying that we had better get off our linguistic asses and get out there and make the world a better place. And so I am very glad that you invited me to come here. I just wanted to say that I'm trying to do that and you're helping me.
That's great. Well, it makes me think back when I was in high school and probably in college. I'm a graduate of ETSU, and the phrase Ebonics. And that was shunned upon, and oh no, and then sitting in an English class and you're using Ebonics. And then I look at Gayle King on CBS News, every now and then, and as amazing as she looks and all that she's got, every now and then she'll slip into some Ebonics, and I'm like, listen to Gayle on TV, words, and it's Gayle King, and she's big time, and nobody's fussing at her, you know, she might get something in her ear, but she's still got her job. And so I too can see how things have moved along and become more accepting of just culture. You know, that's really cool to hear.
And I think part of the assumption with that was that there was no structure to it.
Yes.
Right, but there really is a formula or a structure to Ebonics or these other
Oh,
dialects.
absolutely.
And things like that. It makes me think, I'm gonna butcher this, but this study between white children and Black children, they showed them a picture of Cookie Monster, sick in bed, and Big Bird eating some cookies. And they asked the children, who be eating cookies? And all the white children said, well, Big Bird.
They have to laugh.
I'm serious. So
Yeah.
who be eating cookies?
I held it in as long as I could. Go ahead.
Cookie Monster, because Cookie Monster, it's one of
Yes.
these like
Yes.
past, future tense,
Sure.
tenses
Yeah.
that it's in
Yes.
African American children dialect, but not necessarily in white who be eating cookies, Michelle.
It's the
But that
habitual.
picture was
Yeah.
that was the Big Bird, was eating
Yes.
the actually. And that's what they were wanting to say.
Right.
Who is eating the cookie?
Right.
Well, Big
Right.
Bird, but who be eating
Who
cookies?
be eating
Yeah.
Who be eating cookies?
all the time, right? It's
Habitual.
Cookie Monster.
Oh, that's great.
And in that,
Study.
that's one
Yes.
area where the Black English dialects that include that feature, which I think is all of them, it's actually a more complex grammar.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then, of course, the other dialects are more complex in different aspects. It's not that one is more complex than the other, but there are areas of complexity. And to say that it's a mistake is exactly the opposite. No, it's actually a more refined use. It has a specific way of marking what's habitual.
Yes.
And you look at how many students
Yeah.
have been, you know, big old F's in English class, because we all know
Yeah.
Cookie Monster be eating cookies. I take that
Yes.
back, but I go, you know, oh my gosh, I could just go on and on and on. The people have been judged so many times, and cultures, and situations have been judged so many times as being wrong, when they're really not wrong. It's just not what you want.
Yeah.
And so those people making those calls have been, you know, placing that judgment on innocent people who have been communicating their whole lives, just not with you.
Yeah.
So, wow, very interesting.
Have you all had experiences where, have you ever noticed lack of tolerance of linguistic diversity, like lack of tolerance of the Appalachian dialect or stuff like that?
You know, when you were talking a minute ago, it made me think back when I was teaching, it's probably been about 15 years ago. I was on a committee with Johnson City Schools, and there was a teacher who had moved up through the ranks and was assistant principal, female, white, and she really wanted to go on and just get more education. And the one thing that would bother her more than anything is, as fabulous a teacher she was, she had a very, very strong Southern accent. And her concern was being, she felt no matter how many degrees she got, she would always be considered as less than because of her incredibly strong Southern accent. And there was talk that, well, maybe you need to go, you know, go to take a class on how to change your accent. And I thought, amazing teacher, amazing, and she just moving through, wonderful. But her concern was no one will ever take me serious because her Southern accent was so strong. And I don't know where she is now. I'd love to know, but late from her, take a class.
We have those
Yeah.
data. We have research experiments where you train, you have actors who say the same thing exactly, but they say it in different accents, and you play it for people and ask them to rate the speaker on things like friendliness, intelligence, etc. And they don't know it's the same person. And yeah, people are with Southern accents are rated dumber. And usually more friendly as well,
Wow.
but reliably
And
dumber.
Sky just put in the chat, thank you, the whole element of code switching.
Okay.
where if you go into, there's a certain way to talk in professional settings versus at home. And my personal experience would probably be more of that type of code switching. And I grew up in the time in middle school when Colin Powell was very big. Oh, he speaks so well. He speaks so well. And so my report cards had, she speaks so well, and you know, things like that. So, but in UNC, they had a lot of those classes to take, that students would take, I guess because the UNC accepts the top 10% from any North Carolina high school.
Oh.
You automatically
Okay.
can get into UNC Chapel Hill. And so they had a lot of folks coming in and taking the, is it elocution? No,
Elocution.
elocution
Yeah.
classes,
Okay.
maybe, to get rid of their thick Southern accent.
Okay.
And they would take it right along with all of their other classes, 4 years.
Well, and it has to be a big deal. I remember watching a report, some news report, and the guy was from Africa, beautiful black man from Africa. And he spoke like he, you know, came right out of New York. Like, but he was from Africa, and he was a news reporter somewhere. I don't know, but he was speaking this English that had this accent as if he were right out of New York. Just, and it's, I think my friends, I don't speak black, quote unquote, you know, and then I've heard that before. Well, you don't sound black, and that's a trick I have too. But someone told me my accent sounds like I'm from Ohio. And I'm like, Ohio? And they're like, that's middle America. There's no accent.
Does.
And I just checked it off. I love watching television all the time. So I watch all the different accents and just blend them together. That's where it came from. But that's interesting that, I mean, that just an accent alone like that can rank someone so low as being Southern accent. Yeah.
And a good approach to take is what Sky was talking about, to teach people to use the kind of language that will be most effective for them in a given situation. So, so the approaches that teach kids standard English, not by telling them that the dialect that they're speaking is wrong, but by telling them that they could learn a different kind of English that's more often used in schools, and then comparing them, doing comparative linguistics with them, where you say, this is how you say it in our dialect, and this is how you say it in this other dialect. Those are more effective than telling them that what they're saying is wrong, because they know it's not wrong because they're hearing it from the whole community. Of course it's not wrong. Kids are descriptive linguists.
Now, have you heard of code switching?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so, because in my world, I thought that was just black people. Like, I can talk to you now, but what if I go with my family? I'm like, yo, what's up? This is, so I have my own way of talking. So is code switching something that occurs in all different cultures, and it just depends on which it is, or is that just a black thing?
You can define it different ways. Since most people of the world speak more than one language, they often code switch by mixing several of their languages in one specific situation. So Spanglish is a good example of code switching. That's one way to define it, is mixing up two languages. What Sky was talking about, I think, and what you're probably talking about, could be called, more strictly speaking, register shifting, where you have a different kind of English that you use, or a different kind of French, a different kind of the same language that varies with level of formality or situation. Like, this is how I speak with my homies, and this is how I talk to my teachers. That's probably more closely called register shifting, but you could call it code switching. And most people can do it. Most people have at least a couple of dialects, if not a couple of languages, that they can use for different purposes.
I'd like to ask these folks that are listening if they do register shifting.
Yeah.
If you do register shifting, or like I say, code switching, if you just say yes, this is, and then give us a couple of opportunities when you do that, because I thought that was a black thing. I did. I just thought. Sky's got southern accent.
Phyllis can do it. She can do Louisiana when she wants to.
Actually, if you're hanging out with your Louisiana friends, or if you go home and visit, hang out for a couple of days.
Well, they with probably with more Appalachian friends
Oh, okay.
than, but I can hear David as, as we are in the, Algiers, I can hear him start making shifts. Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
cut off the end of every word.
Yeah. You cut off the consonant of every word and you're good in Louisiana.
That's great.
And you serve that up with a beer. Yeah.
No, I grew up with that a lot. Before caller ID, if you called my mom's work, she would say, answer the phone. She'd say, hello,
Yeah.
this is Shelley Butler, Human Resources, Entity
Yeah.
Corporation.
Yes.
And I'll be like, Mom, and she'd be like, what do you want?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And so we had a comment here. I'm not familiar with this, but do you remember when Dr. Henry Foster spoke to Black students that they needed to speak operational English in business and communication with the public, and then save their dialects for home and social occasions? And so Dr. Henry Foster, I don't know if that was at ETSU.
Was he did not speak at the, what did you say, not, but did he speak at the equity conference this last spring? Foster? Yeah, I don't know that name.
But that's similar to what we were talking about, like the
Yeah.
operational English.
Yeah.
That's pretty similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the nice thing about that is that it says, okay, this kind of English has these sorts of standards, or this genre of writing has these standards. It doesn't mean another way to do it. It doesn't mean that journaling is bad, but if you want to write a business letter, that has different expectations. And so
Yeah.
particularly for first generation college students, it's great to demystify, these are the expectations of this type of English or this type of writing.
Yeah.
Sharing the ropes and not just magically expecting people to know what they are.
A friend of mine was a high school teacher. She used to tell the kids it was like changing your clothes. You don't wear your party dress to hang out in the pool hall, and you don't wear your cutoffs to a wedding. In the same way, you speak the kind of English that goes with the occasion.
Yes.
It's not that your cutoffs are bad clothes.
Yeah.
You just don't wear them to a wedding.
And that's a difference, that a different way of approaching English or language than calling it standard or the correct English or the King's English or anything else. That is more inclusive approach to language, I think.
That's so different from when I was in school.
Me
I
too.
mean, and it's so, it's just, again, embracing that difference
Mhm.
and acknowledging that it works and that there are other ways to do things.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a way to amplify voice, and the voice that's in front of you, not trying to make the voice be like every other voice in the room, but amplifying the beauty of that unique and special and rare voice as it is, and finding the gem in that. And I think that's critical in the classroom.
So it's amazing.
I think it also, I mean, if we're amplifying voices, it seems like we also need to amplify voices. We were talking about this, I think, in the car, amplify voices of, who holds knowledge. So if I'm teaching a literature course, amplifying all different types of voices in that course, or if I'm teaching history, all different perspectives on one history, not just one set group of scholars. And I think, since we're all teachers here, I wonder the ways in which we've individually amplified voices in our classroom, changed up our course text. So we're not just having students read just white, traditional, standard text, but we're having students read alternative voices about the same experiences. I wonder if you can do that, if that's possible to do in y'all's fields.
Well, you know what happened to the teacher in Kingsport that tried to
I
show
do.
different perspectives.
I do.
So that makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
But I agree with you on that. I think, especially in English and history fields.
Yeah.
there's an amazing opportunity to share those incredibly diverse points of view and voices and experiences.
Yeah.
And this might be one for the next time we get together. You know, critical race theory, that is just a big block. And I think a lot of people are, you know, they're going to be nervous to even try to share a different perspective on something because, you know, somebody's going to go home and feel sad.
Yeah.
And we know where that leads everybody. It's an interesting course.
Yeah.
Course not only for the class, but course meaning the destiny of what's to come.
Yeah, and another way to think about that is that when we're working with students in the classroom, we want every student to be able to see themselves in the text. Everyone to be able to see themselves as knowledge makers. And the way to do that is to include texts that include all those diverse experiences and points of view and diversities, so that knowledge is not held by one group.
And on the college level, have you had students who will give a pushback? Like there, for example, the book Beloved with Toni Morrison. I think you know people are like, oh no, we can't. And I know you don't want to read certain things in high school, but even more than that, it's a perspective that you're going to see in this book that I just don't know if you really want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Do you have kids that push back on something that you've asked them to read or an essay that they're like, oh, I can't do this right now?
I work a lot with the teacher prep students because I teach young adult literature and I teach children's literature. In my young adult literature course, what I don't teach the favorite books that they've read I teach the books. I teach a book that hopefully will be on their book nook in their classroom. And each book represents a student that might be in their classroom looking for a story about them. And I've been so proud of our students at ETSU, some of whom I know are reading about experiences that they may disagree with, or they've never come across in they have no experience with an LGBT story, for instance, a story about a young trans high school student, and the way that they understand that as teachers, it's their mandate to give every student in their classroom a great learning experience, that's their mandate. And they have embraced reading and talking about these books, asking questions, and hopefully including them in their book nooks that I don't know about. About that.
You know, I supervise student teachers, and I don't know who they've had for their teachers in the English prep part.
Yeah.
But I supervise some of the English teachers, and I've had students come out. I leave the class in tears because of the books that they do their
TPA.
all of that. Yes.
Yeah.
And one of my students she had a job before she finished her student teaching. Every class period, she put a quote up from a woman of color or a man of color in her English class. And they read, is it the breadwinner? But it was about this Afghanistan child.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm like, wow.
The Kite Runner.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, just this,
Yeah.
and it was, but this one was about a girl who had to dress up as a guy, as a boy, so she could go work and make money selling bread for her family.
Okay, that's a different one. That's a different
I think it's
one.
called
That's
the
not,
breadwinner.
yeah, that's not.
But you know, it was Afghanistan, and you know,
Yeah.
can't work with those folks.
Right.
It was, she was dressing like a boy
Yeah.
and going out into the world and working and breaking all the laws. And I mean, and these kids were just amazed. I mean, she did such a fabulous job, and
Yeah.
she got a job in the Kingsport system.
That's great.
Fabulous teacher,
Yeah.
fabulous. So she took me 1 year.
So.
1 month. But I could see the fruits of that.
Yeah.
Because my son came home reading that dang To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a great story, great movie.
Yeah.
But my God, how many years we're gonna read this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can see that he came home the next month or so, he was reading The Hate You Give.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
That's a
But
tough one, but
yeah.
they're seeing that. They're seeing
Yeah.
that, so.
Yeah.
I like
And
to look up the banned book list. And just
Mhm.
send that over to Amazon
Right.
and get that.
And check out Jason Reynolds, who is our ambassador at the Library of Congress for young adult literature. And he is just
African-American
phenomenal.
man, right? Is he a
Yes,
black man?
he is.
Yes, I
Yes.
think I saw a report on him.
He's
Yes.
just phenomenal. And, and the books that he's writing are the books and the stories that kids are living right now. He's writing about their stories, their lives, their experiences. And so kids connect. And if that's what we want to do, if connection is part of the larger learning experience, then we need to get books in kids' hands that they really have connections with.
Wow. Because we have like 4 minutes left. So do you guys have questions for each other? Look, this conversation just took off.
Some of the ones we planned are kind of too big to deal with in 4
Yeah,
minutes.
In
huh?
4 minutes,
I
yeah.
know.
Let's see.
Yeah.
We were actually going to ask you all, what was the inspiration for
Yeah,
this
for the
program?
Program, yeah.
Well, we'll have to bring Sky McFarlane on.
Yeah.
Wow, let's see. I think, well, so I'm on the advisory board here with McKinney Center, and we have a diversity and inclusion section as well. And Sky, you can jump in there, but we were talking about, I think this started when the ETSU bucks the guys Mlk, and we were thinking there should be an opportunity to talk, and not just about political things, but talk about what goes on in this area with individuals, similarities and differences. And so we start and I think Scott, you want to jump in here? I know you want to, but Scott's got all the answers in there.
Yeah, I don't know if I have all the answers, but I gotta take my headphones out. I'm echoing. But it was initially, I do think after George Floyd was killed, and race was on the minds of a lot of us. And we heard a lot of comments, things like, that doesn't happen around here. And, we do a lot of story work at the McKinney Center with the Storytown Initiative. They have a monthly radio show where they take local stories and turn it into kind of like a play or skits. And then we'll do huge community play every year that's taken from local stories. And so we like collecting people's real stories. And we see the way that really works to humanize other people. Because if you aren't showing each other the other real humans that live in the space with you, of course you're never going to have any empathy, sympathy for them. And so we see it just kind of as an educational way to create a space where we can hear from one another in a really sincere way. And if we end up having a lot of people who are very same in conversation, it works well because people are comfortable that way. And we don't want to put anyone in like gotcha situations. But I think there's, people exposing each other, like exposing their own stories to one another can be a really successful way to learn. So that's kind of where it came from.
Cool.
And it's been really, it's been pretty amazing. It has. I think we came and we always come with a set of questions and
That we never use.
Never get through.
we may start with one or something, but the conversation just moves. And I think that's the beauty of real people having a real conversation, and other people are online get to hear that, and every now and then they'll chime in, and it's just good to see that this is real. We don't have an agenda. It's just a conversation, and I think more and more people are saying, wow, it's pretty cool, whether there's an educational component to it or just two different people that have crossed paths this way, or usually you get two people that kind of know each other, maybe not, and,
Okay.
and that way there's a little bit of a connection, but then they find all these other pieces. You know, so.
Yeah, I love the way that these conversations amplify voice, and I love the way that it's a conversation, so it's in relationship with one another. And one of the things I think about is when we're working with people in trauma-informed care, when people start telling their story, we often say that's when they start the healing process. It's in retelling that story that you really begin to make connections and heal. And so I find this is a very trauma-informed experience as well, because of the amplifying of voices and the connections and the relationship and the conversation.
Yeah.
And
So-
of course, it's important that the people who are moderating the conversation are, you know, who they are,
Yeah.
not just because you're people of color, but
Oh, wait.
because you're really natural and interested in talking to people. But I think we don't have a lot of conversations that are led by people of color. So I think that's a very important element.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So what's our little back out words? Just back here.
MLK Day, Food Drive.
So, yeah, I believe the MLK Food Drive is still going on through Thursday, January 17th. You can drop off food Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the JAMA Food Pantry. I don't know if that's an official acronym, but and then with the McKinney Center Facebook page, there'll be hopefully a Facebook Live Martin Luther King Jr. Day virtual event. And again, that's on the McKinney Center Facebook page.
And you can bring this through Saturday as well, and just drop off at the McKinney Center if you want to drop off food there too.
And so the Facebook Live event will be at 2 p.m. on Monday.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us.
Have a great one. Go buy bread and milk. It's gonna snow. Thank you, folks.